and welcome to AI Dev World 2025. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Nabil Bukhari, CTO and CPO at Extreme Networks.
Thank you, Betsy. Appreciate that. And welcome, everybody. Good morning. We did this presentation live last week in Santa Clara. That was a lot of fun. It's a different format, but we'll probably talk about the same things. So let's get started. Formula for success in enterprise AI. Because right now, if you're working on AI, your main goal is to bring it together, productize it in such a way that people actually use it and you can make that product successful. Now, if that is, and by the way, if you are a developer, that's your goal. If you are a product manager, that is your goal. If you are a business leader, that is your goal. And if you are a seller, that is your goal. So success in AI, that's consistent, sustainable growth and revenue and adoption, that's really the success that we are talking about. That's really the goal that we all have. Now, in that context, I have good news and I have bad news. So let's start with bad news first. The bad news is that you cannot get to success in AI simply on the basis of technology. And let me say that again. I'm not saying technology is not important. I'm not saying technology is not differentiated. Technology is amazing. It is actually moving faster than it has ever moved perhaps in our lifetime or perhaps ever. And there's amazing technology that comes out every single day. But if you're looking for that success in AI, then it cannot be built simply on technology. So that's the bad news. But there is a good news. The good news is that you can absolutely develop sustainable growth and sustainable adoption on enterprise AI if you follow some of the fundamentals of value and productization. And that is what we're going to talk about today. So this presentation typically is a 2-day workshop that we do. So I'm going to try and squeeze it in like 20 odd minutes in the next right here for you. So we'll go pretty fast, but feel free to ask questions and you can always reach out after the fact and have more conversations around it. All right. So success in AI, some information here and there, but these are the 3 factors to consider. If you are looking for success in AI, you have to consider the human factor, you have to consider the technology factor, and then perhaps one of the most important one, which is the money aspect, and we'll go through each one of them independently. So human factors. Look, we're talking about artificial intelligence, but the end of the chain is always a human. It is that user. So anything that we do around AI has to consider that human at the end of it, and that human behaves in multiple different ways. So when we think about the human factor while developing AI products, especially in enterprises, some of the things that we have to consider are things like trust. There's things like perceived value, and there's a very particular reason why I'm talking about perceived value. There are things like perceived accuracy, perceived value, perceived fear, because remember, it's humans we are talking about, not machines. So our decisions and our decision to either adopt the technology, use it, buy it, not buy it, it's not dictated by fear, but fear definitely plays a role in it. And then, of course, the UI experience. So these factors are the one that you should absolutely consider first before you go and looking for which LLM you're going to use. Okay, so we're going to go through a few of them. Not all of them, but you'll get the gist of how to consider these factors when you are developing an application or AI application for enterprise. So let's talk about the interface for AI. Now, of course, 2-3 years ago when ChatGPT arrived, everybody got used to this conversational interface. There's a chatbot, and then you go into it and you chat with it, and it responds almost like a human. And that was a wow factor for everybody in the industry at that point in time. But we have come a long ways since then, and there are multiple different ways to interface with them. Now, before I go into that and why you would pick one over the other, a quick note that these are interfaces that we have productized ourselves in our platform. And most of the things that I'm talking about here today are learnings that we have gathered over many, many years since we have been productizing AI. Now, obviously, before generative AI, it was the traditional AI, and before that, it was the machine learning. So we have been in the process or in the business of adding AI and ML capabilities into our products for a good part of maybe 7-8 years. So this is a distillation of that experience there. So Extreme Platform One, that's our main product, that's our main platform. So you can look these things up as well if you wanted to see how exactly did we do that. But coming back to what are the three interfaces you can consider? There's the conversational interface, there's the collaborative interface, and then obviously there's the autonomous interface, or in said another way, those are the AI agents, which these days you can't turn around without running into a conversation around AI agents. So, but things to consider. They all bring certain values to it. Conversational, very familiar. People think of them as assistant, and it generates a little fear. People are so used to it in their personal life that then when they see it in the enterprise environment, there is little reaction and adoption can be pretty high. Conversational interfaces are the norm today. But now we are starting to see some collaborative interfaces. Like in Extreme Platform One, we call it the AI Canvas. I think OpenAI kind of called it Canvas as well. And the idea there is that now you are collaborating with an AI in an environment and building something together. Those are pretty new, so they're differentiated. But again, they're considered as assistant and advisors, and it can create differentiation in your environment. Now, for some, the holy grail is obviously autonomous, which is AI agents. But just remember, the autonomous interface, which is best suited for agents, that garners the most amount of fear because people think of that as AI that could take their jobs. So if you decide to put that interface in your application, then you have to consider how your user is going to respond to it, not just on a factual level, but also on an emotional level. So some things to consider when it comes to the interface for AI when you're building an application for enterprise. Now, the thing to consider is a lot of times when technology companies build products, they build products first, technologies first, and then they go out and say like, okay, now where can I apply it? Obviously, I'm over exaggerating. Some of the best companies don't do it that way, but a lot of companies do. But when it comes to AI, you really start from the use case. What is the application for it? Or said another way, you back into your application from the value that you want to deliver. And now I'll give you a quick anecdote here. You know, we did this experiment recently. We took like 18 people in a room. We gave them a blank piece of paper and a pencil. And we said like, look, okay, you have 60 seconds. AI can do anything for you. What would you like it to do? And we gave them 60 seconds to write it down. Take a wild guess. How many people wrote something on it? 50% of the people didn't write anything. Why? Because when something can do anything, then it kind of stops you in your track. And you get into that mode where it's like, oh, what do I want this to do? The point that we are making here is start from a well-defined value before you get into developing your applications. Now, there are many different ways to figure out value. This is an ARC framework. I've written quite a bit about it. This is what we use, and it's very simple. What are the things that you want to accelerate? What are the things that you want to replace? And what are the things that you want to create? Think about, you know, I don't want to write documents by myself. I want to accelerate that process by using an AI writer. Okay, that's an acceleration use case. You already know what the value for acceleration is. That is typically reduction in cost, reduction in time, efficiency, yada, yada, yada. Replace is, hey, let's take a technical enterprise example. I am running my networks. I do not want to troubleshoot because it takes me 4 days and it's too much effort. I just want to replace it and I just want AI to do it for me. Remember, this is just troubleshooting, not fixing the network. Now you can replace it. Again, you know, very well-defined value propositions and so on and so forth in Create. So if you start with the use case, if you start with the value, then later down the road, it will be very easy for you to then express it, and we'll see why that is so important. So different human factors that play into it. Trust is very important. And, you know, here we are showing some of the examples of how adoption works. By the way, trust is not a linear thing. It's not like if I trust a conversational interface, then I'm automatically going to trust an autonomous interface as well. No, trust kind of goes up and down depending on what your use case is. Similarly, adoption goes up as the perceived value goes up. If I find it useful, I'm going to use it. If I don't find it useful, I'm not going to use it, right? Similarly, if it's accurate, I'm going to use it. If I perceive it not to be accurate, I'm not going to use it. Fear is a big part, and ease of UI. So these are some of the human factors that you must absolutely consider before you start building your application. Okay, if I were to kind of summarize it, because we're all nerdy, geeky people and we love our formulas. So if I were to convert it into a formula, that would simply be user experience over trust gap. So things that enhance my user experience, they increase adoption. Things that decrease my adoption are things like trust gap and fear and so on and so forth. All right, let's go to the technology factor. Now, as I said earlier, there is advancement in technology at a breakneck pace. So while you and I are talking here, there's probably new techniques that are being pushed out. There's new breakthroughs that are happening in LLMs and so on and so forth. And it's actually so fast right now that it's impossible to talk about that, hey, this is the right tech stack that you should be working on, because that changes so drastically and so quickly. So let's just generalize it. Typically, at the top of the stack, you have some safety and guardrails. Remember, you're building it for enterprises, so safety and guardrail is probably the most important thing to consider. It doesn't matter how valuable your application is. If it cannot be used in an enterprise environment, then it is useless. And remember, in enterprise environments, there are multiple different spheres of guardrails and safeties, from very regulated environments to environments that are not that regulated, but still the business risk is very high. So safety and guardrails are directly proportional to the business risk. And this is the first thing, and perhaps the most important thing, that will determine whether you can have success in an enterprise AI application or not. AI services is a collection bucket for all things AI, starting from your ML models, your AI models, your LLMs, and all those kind of things they put into the AI environment, your RAG architectures, how do you train it, so on and so forth. The thing is, it is undifferentiated. Now, what do I mean by that? It is crazy amazing application, but the fact that it's undifferentiated means that you would not be able to differentiate against a competitor just on the basis of your AI services, right? No matter what anybody tells you, that is not a sustainable moat. And actually, with the recent, like 3-4 weeks ago, with the big announcements and stuff across the globe, that became very clear that there is no technology moat. So while you have to get this right, it will not create that differentiation for you. Then the last part at the bottom that feeds it all is your data hub, data fabric, data pipeline, whatever word you want to use. But simply, in simple English, this is where you collect a lot of data, you index it, you organize it in such a way that your AI services can actually use that. This is perhaps the most complicated thing to figure out when it comes to enterprises, because number one, enterprise data is not structured. It is in silos. In most of the time, enterprises can't tell you where that data exists. And most enterprises can't even tell you if that data is valid and accurate or not. So that's kind of something to consider, that where would you get the data? How would you ingest it? How would you normalize it? I'll give you an anecdotal kind of thing on this, that while we were developing all of this product, we realized that the places in the organization, in the enterprise where we generate data, we have to go and change them. As an example, people who were writing documents for human consumption, we had to change the way of writing so that it could be much simpler, because that's easier for an AI system to consume. So now you are creating data, for example, documentation guides and stuff like that, for AI consumption rather than human consumption. And that's a pretty big shift. So you have to consider these things. So from a tech stack point of view, from a technology point of view, these are the big boulders that you have to consider. So don't go deep into what model, what LLM right away, but start from the top and then start filling in, the details in there. A word on accuracy. So and I know it was a lot easier when we were in a room with a bunch of people and I was able to ask them that question, but just play along. In your head, answer the following question. What do you think is the percentage accuracy of a human subject matter expert? I'll give you a second there and have that answer in your mind. If you said 90, 95%, you are partially right. So a lot of work has gone into it, and based on different use cases, and I'm talking about enterprise use cases, I'm not talking about consumer use cases, the accuracy of a human subject matter expert goes from 80% to 95%. And you'd be like, well, why such a huge difference? It's the same SME. So it's not like one is more skilled than the other. It depends upon the time of the day, how tired they are, how long they've been working. Maybe on a Monday morning after a cup of coffee, it's 95%. And on a late Friday afternoon, it drops down to about 82%. So it swings between 80 to 95%. So then the question is, how accurate should your AI application be, right? The answer to that is not 95%. Why? Because there's a cost associated with every additional accuracy. So the thing is, you have to be accurate enough to be perceived at least as accurate or more accurate compared to a human subject matter expert, but more importantly, consistency. So if your model is accurate 90%, then it is accurate 90% almost all the times. So the more you reduce the variability in your accuracy percentage, the more you would be perceived accurate. So consider this, because going for the top end of accuracy is not always the right answer. Platforms and AI, this is a huge conversation on its own, but our view on this is very simple. For as long as AI stays within applications, the AI is fractured, AI is siloed, and there's limited value to it. If you want to produce value through AI in an enterprise environment, then marry your AI with platforms. And hint, hint, the biggest advantage of platforms is the availability of data. And by the way, putting in those safeguards and that guardrails on top of it, that's a lot easier to do in a well-managed platform as opposed to 18 different applications, which are all siloed. So big topic on this, but for the sake of time, we will kind of move on from there. But if you are developing AI for enterprise, think platforms and not applications. Okay, velocity. I very specifically differentiate between velocity and speed. Speed, people think about like, hey, the faster I can produce product or features, this is high speed, and I can be very, capable of doing that, and I can be very differentiated with that. The answer is not really. What you're looking for is velocity. You're looking for velocity within your organization, which is producing that document, as well as within the organization in which you're trying to sell that application. And velocity is a combination of multiple different things. It goes from design, it goes from your socio-technical perspective, which is and in that perspective is the people, it is how you organize them, what is the culture that you create and stuff. So all of these things come together to create velocity. Velocity is not, and I repeat, it's not the speed at which we produce features, but it is the combination of technology, culture, and understanding in your organization and what you could impart to your customer's organization. Again, a major topic, a topic that a lot of people kind of ignore, but is absolutely critical when it comes to sustainable success. So if you were to summarize this would be more like velocity. Your success chances goes up with velocity. Remember, it's not speed, it's velocity. And your success goes down as your perceived accuracy goes down. So it's not factual accuracy, it's actually perceived accuracy. Okay, willingness to pay. Now, that's a very interesting concept, because if you are building AI for your own enterprise, so talk about an internal project and your team has been assigned to do something for your enterprise, then that willingness to pay would show up as how much budget do you get. But if you are producing a product, then it will show up like how much somebody's willing to pay for it, or in other words, price. So price and internal budgets are very similar to each other. They both attach to willingness to pay, which is what is it that somebody is willing to give in terms of money for the application, for the use case that you are working on or you're trying to productize. Now, in that willingness to pay, there are multiple factors that are really important. The first one is, how do you package AI? And this is a very fast moving pace. Those of you who are more product managers or product owners in this space, this is probably one of the most difficult questions to figure out. How are you going to package it and how are you going to price it? Is it going to be part of a brand new subscription? Is it going to be part of your existing product subscription or license? If so, how much of an uplift? Is it going to be consumption based? Is it going to be perpetual? Is it going to be all you can eat? So these are all these questions that are absolutely fundamental to any success in enterprise AI. Enterprises will not buy your product unless you can very clearly describe this. So just our experience on this, you do what you do, and you will figure out what works for your application. But what we found out was that from an interface point of view, at this point in time, customers are not willing to pay you additional or extra or a separate subscription for chatbots. I laugh about this, that 15 years ago when, or however many years ago, when cell phones came out, and all of a sudden, wherever you looked, there was an app for it. And we have gone from there's an app for it to there's a chatbot for it. And everywhere you turn around, there's a chatbot to it, every single application, which means that it is table stakes, it's devalued, you cannot charge additional for that. But as you move towards autonomous agents, there's still a propensity for people to think of it as a different thing, and you can probably attach some monetary value to it. But remember, consumption is always better. Why? Because people don't really know how much they're going to use it. So this is just what has worked for us, but I'll leave it to you. How do you determine it? Now, remember we talked about ARC framework previously, and we said that if you use ARC framework to figure out the use cases, it will help you later down the road. This is that point where ARC is going to help you. If you figured out the use case based on an ARC framework, then you already know how to determine and demonstrate the value or the ROI of your application. Very simply, if you accelerated a use case, then your value is around cost efficiency, reduction in time, and so on and so forth. And you will be able to not only show it, but you'll be able to determine it, and you can show it to your customer and user how to think of the ROI. Similarly, if you're replacing an existing function or an existing cost, then it becomes a little bit easier. So do this work upfront, and that will help you in determining the monetization strategy for your AI. Okay, that's ROI, that's monetization, that's packaging. But then how do you price this? Well, you can price it multiple different ways, and there's no right answer. And quite frankly, this is the biggest thing that the industry as a whole is trying to figure it out. You can price it in the traditional way based on your cost of delivery, but don't do that because that cost of delivery is declining very rapidly. Or on the other side of the spectrum, you can determine it based on the value that the outcome generates. But remember, that is very difficult to convince an enterprise and to manage and operate. So this is something that you have to figure out. And this is an open question for most of us out there. Now, we have 1 minute left, but a word on AI agents. Everybody wants to put AI agents. We're going to go from the world of there's an app for it, there is a chatbot to it, to there is an agent for it. And there will be agents that will be unsuccessful and agents that are successful. Word of advice, if you're building an AI agent, write down a job description for that AI agent. Think of it as if you are hiring a human person. Write a job description for your AI agent, start from there, and it will become a lot easier. Okay, we're coming to the end of this. And I know I'm just looking at the clock and I'm laughing. This is something that we do over a course of 2 days. And here we are on the 25th minute, and let's summarize this. So putting it all together. Success in AI has a human factor, a technology factor, and willingness to pay. And this is really what the formula becomes. That is not to say that these are the only factors that are important. But if you take care of these factors, then the chances of success for you in AI, especially as it relates to enterprise, would go up tremendously. In the end, one thing that you should not do is sit around and just think about it day in and day out. So go out, start producing application, take some of these lessons that we have learned over time, use them, make them your own, and I think you will be very successful. Let's continue this conversation, in the community and out there in the ether. Good luck to you. Have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll meet again. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.